Welcome back to the Shreve Crump and Low YouTube channel. My name is Bwalker, and we are here filming our first ever series of Collector to Collector with local Bostonian David Chang and prolific watch collector. David, thank you.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me. Especially honored to be part of this first one.
It's a pleasure. It's an absolute pleasure, really, and a privilege. So one of the first questions, obviously, in the series is, what got you started in your watch collecting journey?
My mother did. My mother got me started. And while the watch is not on this table, it goes back to her days when she was an investment banker, traveling often a week, 2 weeks at a time. And with those travels was associated some guilt. And so to offset some of that guilt, she would often bring me home something. And this is when I'm, 5, 6 years old. And I remember clearly one year her bringing me back a swatch, but not just any swatch. It was a swatch where the band smelled like bananas. And I think to this day, well, probably one of the reasons I love bananas is the fact that it's associated to that watch. So I wish I still had it here. Swatches were a big part of my early interest in watches. I'm not going to call it collecting quite yet. But then my first watch above a swatch was a Breitling. And it was a Breitling that was gifted to me by my stepfather. And
we have this watch here.
Actually, we don't. But I'll tell you why. Because I wore it every day one summer. And then one day I left it on the side of the pool and went home, realized I left it, told my stepdad. We got in the car, drove back to the pool, and it was gone. And so knowing just how disappointed I was, they made sure that I would get another one to replace it. So it is this one. It's a Colt. You can see it's been well loved. One of the great things is, unlike any of the other watches, it doesn't need to be wound or kept on a winder because it's quartz.
Perfect.
So, yeah. So this was certainly one of the first that I remember and obviously still treasure to this day.
It's a great story. It's a great way to get into watch collecting.
Yeah.
What age was that?
So that was at 16. And I will also tell you, it was a great way to learn to not put your watch on the side of the pool and forget it. And, to this day, I'm extremely careful about my watches, where I wear them, how I wear them, when I walk through a door, to make sure that it doesn't knock in something that is my biggest fear.
Mm-hmm. We learned the hard lessons in the early years. Though.
Yes.
So thankful for that. It was a quartz watch and
yes.
Something more expensive and more mechanical.
Absolutely.
So you've been collecting since you were 16 years old. I won't ask you your age now, but I'm certain it's a number of decades you've been collecting for, and you've amassed a pretty significant collection that has a really great breadth of, every genre, vintage, new, complications of all sorts. What is your methodology or philosophy with collecting?
Well, for me, it's all about the journey, and it's a journey that takes you in a lot of different directions and that you should embrace as it being a journey. It's not one where, again, for me, focusing on one brand or one type has satiated me, if you want. Mm-hmm. It's a journey where exploring vintage and modern, exploring independence and the more traditional brands, exploring different sizes. It's really about being able to learn over time what you really love. And I feel very fortunate to be able to say this, right? To be able to say that I've been able to explore through these different types over the years. But there's no better way than to try new things. And Paul Boutros, who works at Philips, is a very good friend. And there's one thing that he told me very early on in our friendship, and it was like, you have to love the watch on your wrist. Mm-hmm. You have to love it on your wrist.
Wise words from a wise man.
Yes. I mean, you can love a watch on this table, you can love a watch on a computer screen, but ultimately you need to love it on your wrist.
Absolutely. Is there a watch here on the table that sort of epitomizes at the moment, what you said your culmination of collecting has been over the past couple decades?
In many ways, it's all of these because they have a story to tell, right? They have a story to tell. In many ways also, because it has been a journey, each one today sort of fits a different role. So if I I would say one of the culminations is the 5970. It's from Patek Philippe. It's for me, one of the most perfect watches from a size perspective, the complication behind it, obviously the history behind the brand and the symmetry of the watch, and then,
Familiar watch.
familiar watch. Thank you to you for making this happen a couple of years ago. But I put it on the wrist, and this is what I mean by you have to love it on the wrist, and I absolutely love it.
Looks great.
It's how many times have you heard, Brian, people say that they look down at their watch and they have no idea what the time is, and they have to look back again to actually see what time it is.
I've heard it.
Yeah. So
yeah, it's a beautiful proportion case. Arguably the most wearable of the Patek Perpetual Calendar chronograph series.
I'm biased this way, certainly. And I have a small wrist, and so some of the larger, more recent models fit me much less well than this one, certainly.
If it's hard to read the black dial, you of course have a white dial that you can pull from the watch box and enjoy.
Yes, I'm shy to say, of course, but yes, I do. And that watch is actually also very special. I was inspired by the interview that Ben Clymer gave to John Mayer, and John Mayer talked about the 5970G, and I became frankly obsessed with this model after watching that episode. I don't know, a dozen times at least. What I love about this has everything to do with what I said earlier, but on top of it, when I look at this one, I've had it since 2017, and it took a lot of effort emotionally and financially to take this step. And so I look at it and it reminds me of that. And I also took it on a very important business trip. The day that I acquired it, I was leaving that evening and brought it with me. And so it certainly is associated with that trip and the many other trips that I've taken it on.
So this watch was very important to you because it symbolizes almost like a stepping stone into the next phase of collecting.
Yes.
For you as a collector, where, previously you may have had some entry-level complications, more entry-level pieces, and then this was a big jump, a big leap for you to finally make the decision to say, I'm going to make the investment and the acquisition of such a complicated timepiece.
Yes. And you mentioned investment. We for me, it's a passion. I love watches, but I didn't at the time appreciate sort of this notion that there is value in these watches, that they don't depreciate like other assets, like other certain other luxury goods, and that's why it felt like such a leap to take.
Absolutely.
At the time.
David, so would you say there's someone that has mentored you or been a figure that you look up to as you are acquiring new pieces, who maybe has been a guide over the years, someone who has been able to steer you in the right direction?
Yes. Well, first of all, you asked this question, and there are many who come to mind, but there's one person who comes to mind and rises to the top, and that's Paul Boutros. I met Paul in May of 2018, and I was traveling down to New York with a very close friend of mine. We went to the Daytona Ultimatum preview show, and I even found this catalog of it here. I try to save the catalog. So we went to the Philips headquarters in Manhattan, and I remember going to the preview, and that was my first one, and just looking at the watches. And I remember these very kind people there being like, is there any watch that you'd like to try on? Like, you're kidding me, right? Like, I get to try those on. So tried on a few of those watches, and I've been a Daytona fan. It is a big part of my love for watches.
Can I ask, is there a watch on the table that was from that auction?
There is one which was from the auction, but it's not a Daytona.
Okay.
It's a Breguet Type 20. I'll tell you a little bit about this, but perhaps I can tell you how I got to it.
Please.
At one point, my friend and I are at this preview, and Paul comes over and introduces himself. And for me, it was like meeting a celebrity because I had watched a few videos of him and he had just given an interview the week before.
Very well spoken.
Extremely well spoken. And we talked for a few minutes. And after that, he gave me his card. He said, feel free to give me a call if you want to talk more about watches. And so I didn't know if he was kidding or not. I didn't know if I was going to waste his time.
It's very genuine.
Yes, that is one. It's so genuine, so knowledgeable, so kind. And so we talked the following week for over an hour. And he gave me advice. And he also said, you should come to the auction. It's in Geneva. I know it's in a few days, but why not come? I don't usually do these things on the spur of the moment, but I called my mother. I said, do you want to come with me to Geneva to go to a watch auction? Given that she was the spark to my love for watches, and she didn't hesitate. She was like, let's go. And so we went to the auction, spent more time with Paul, and that was the beginning. I mean, I've wasted so many hours of Paul's time just asking him questions, but more than that, it really has been a real friendship that has developed over the years. But how did this watch come about? At the preview on the day of the auction, it's the morning of the first day of the auction, we're looking around at different watches, and I ask if I can see this one. It's a 1956 Type 20 Breguet. Mm-hmm. It comes from the French Air Force. And I grew up in France. I spent the first 17 years of my life in France. I was like, okay, I'm curious about this watch. They bring it over, and Isabella Breguet, who works very closely with Paul, comes over and sort of gives me a little bit more of the history, and I turn it around, and on the back of it are dates, and each of those dates is called a fin de garantie, which is essentially the end of warranty for each time the watch has been serviced. Mm-hmm. And I look at all of the dates, and the last date on it is February 1979. So you said you were going to age me earlier, but I was born in February 1979.
It was meant to be.
It was meant to be. The auction takes place that afternoon. The first part of it is the Daytona Ultimatum. No watches from that. They were in such high demand, frankly. And then after that is the auction where this watch came for sale. And I remember being extremely nervous, more nervous I am now talking to you, raising my paddle for the first time ever at an auction. I bid on it, didn't get it, bid on it. And then one of the things that Paul told me is have a budget. Mm-hmm. And so I was getting very close to my budget, and I bid on it once more, hit my budget, and someone outbid me. Oof. And then I look at my mom, and my mom is like, are you kidding me? Get in there.
Step up.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And so I put one more bid in.
That was the winning bid.
It was a winning bid, and Orel Box, another person I admire and who's been a mentor, hits the gavel, and it became mine. And so ever since, obviously it reminds me of that first experience. It reminds me of Paul. And importantly, it reminds me of that weekend I got to spend with my mother. And so there's something extremely special about this watch.
It's a great story and a great watch.
It is.
An absolutely beautiful example of a mil-spec. Well, that was an incredibly sentimental story. That leads me to my next question for you, which was going to be, what watch in your collection is a watch that holds a significant amount of emotional connection or sentimentality?
Many of them. Let's be honest. Like that is in many ways what connects you to those watches, the moments in which you wear them. But there's likely one watch that in some ways sort of sparked my, I want to call it acceleration into this hobby, into this passion, which is the Serrochrome Daytona. I remember in March of 2016, that watch was released in Baselworld. I remember the picture that Rolex released with the watch. And obviously I didn't see the watch itself in the metal, but I saw that picture and it was like love at first sight.
Yeah.
If such a thing can happen. I really wanted this watch, And one of my very good friends was walking through downtown Boston one day and saw it and was like, David, I think I saw the watch. I see the watch that you talked about.
In the showcase at a retailer.
Yes.
Wow. Those were the days.
Those were the days. And so I went as quickly as I could, and it didn't matter. I needed to do this because I knew that the opportunity might not present itself again. And so, this watch was by far, one of the most important, most sentimental in terms of connecting me to this hobby, which has not just connected me to watches, but has connected me to amazing people. We are part of this group called Escapement in Boston, and actually across other cities in the U.S. and even outside of the U.S. And this group is a group of people that have become such great friends, who I admire, from whom I get advice, but with whom I can share this passion, these stories, without having to talk about anything but watches. It doesn't matter what we do in our life day to day. This is our passion that connects us. And I think that the fact that we're called Escapement sort of really captures the fact that it's sort of our escape from other parts of our life.
David, I'm sure there are a lot of viewers out there who are looking at your wrist right now and they see this lovely piece of skin art you have. Can you explain a little bit more about what that symbolizes to?
So this is a Swiss leather escapement. It is tied to our group Escapement, of course. It is appropriately positioned underneath the watch, which I tend to wear a watch, you can imagine.
Oh, yes.
It connects me to all of the members of Escapement. And there are some amazing people. All of the people, I should say, are amazing within this group. It's a community of kind people who push each other and support each other in this passion. And one of the things that for me is really important about Escapement is that we encourage each other in this hobby as opposed to introduce any jealousy. It would be very easy, don't you think?
Absolutely.
And so there is this genuine happiness that comes across in person, or when we're exchanging text messages and someone announces a new watch acquisition. Like, you can feel it throughout the community.
You can. As a member of the group myself, thank you.
Yes.
Over the years, I love to get that text message, new watch alert, when someone posts their new watch and everyone in the group says, oh, that's so cool. That's great. I love that watch.
Yes.
It is a group of great individuals and a great community.
It's a great community. It's a diverse community in so many ways that you want to think about diversity, interests of watches, how long people have been collecting for, ages, gender. Like, you think about the diversity of this group, and I'm so proud of that. I think it has a lot to do with why it's such a close-knit community.
And between all the members, just an encyclopedic amount of watch knowledge, between everyone.
Yes.
You have people in there who love vintage. You have people in there who love modern, the nuanced details of different movements. I mean, people go really deep.
Yes. One of the other things I love about this group is that it represents also the watch community within Boston. Not just the collectors, but I would say collectors who are also in watches as their livelihood. And
like myself.
Like yourself, of course. And to me, that's really special, because when you think about the people who work at authorized dealers or who sell pre-owned pieces, they love watches. And I think the best people who sell watches for a living are those for whom it's a passion, because that comes right across.
Absolutely. So David, you have dozens of watches in your collection. This is just actually a small sampling of what you have in most of your collection. Is there a watch that is here that you have a memorable or a really fond story of the acquisition process?
Actually, so many of these watches come to mind and carry a story with them. Actually, those stories are captured. I have a journal that I've been keeping for several years where I keep these stories because my memory is starting to fade quickly. And so it's important for me to write them down, to handwrite them. The one that comes to mind is this J.N. Shapiro, this Joshua N. Shapiro Infinity Series number 8, which is a lucky number. My mother is Chinese, and so lucky number 8. The story is a few years ago, I was at a watch dealer in Rhode Island. I went in it, and there was a Josh Shapiro watch, and I tried it on, and it was absolutely gorgeous, and I wanted to learn more about it. The story that I was hearing from the dealer felt incomplete. I really wanted to reach out to Josh himself. Mm-hmm. And so I went on Josh's website. I sent an email, and a few hours later, he got back to me, and he said, "I'd love to chat with you." And so we got on the phone, and we talked for hours. And we talked about his passion, how he got into watches. And after that, I was like, I would love to own one of your pieces. Mm-hmm. And what is so special about his pieces is the amount of love and time that he dedicates to the dial. And today he's revolutionizing, if you want, or re-revolutionizing watchmaking in the United States. And at the time, it was really starting with the art of making the dial. Mm-hmm. And so this Infinity series, which this sub-dial for seconds, has a basket weave within the basket weave. Mm-hmm. In terms of the guilloche.
And then on the sub-second hand, you actually have the Infinity logo, which is a nice touch.
You do.
Yeah.
And so there's something else that was really special. So went on, I ordered the watch. It would take a few months for him to make it. I told him I was coming to Los Angeles, where he's based. He was like, "Okay, you should come over to my workshop, and I have a surprise for you." So during that trip to Los Angeles, I went over to the workshop with one of my closest friends, Jimmy. Jimmy lives in LA, is a big reason why I love to go there. He's like a brother to me. And Jimmy and I went to Josh's workshop, and the surprise was the opportunity for me to participate in the engraving of the watch.
Wow.
And so he had essentially finished the watch except for one column. And so he was very patient with me, taught me how to work this machinery that dates back to the early 1900s, mid 1900s.
An original Rose engine lathe machine.
Exactly.
Incredible.
Yes. And as much as watches are my passion, for him, part of it is collecting these amazing pieces of history and using them and learning how to use them. I finished the last column, once again, extremely nervous while I was doing so. And then obviously he had to finish the watch, encase it, etc. And then he sent me the watch. And when I opened the watch, there's something very special about it, which is his name is obviously at the center of the dial where it belongs. But on the bottom right of it is my name. He said, "You participate in making this watch. It's only fair." So, this is something that obviously is sentimentally extremely special, mm-hmm. carries a very important story, and is also associated with someone, again, that I really admire.
Absolutely.
For his kindness, the person he is, but also the healthy ambition that he has to
revolutionize the American watchmaking industry. I had the pleasure, actually, of meeting Josh in our storefront on Newbury Street. And Josh came in, he introduced himself to me. I didn't know what he looked like. He came in and said, "Hi, I'm Josh Shapiro. I wanted to say hello." And I was just stunned with his kindness and just, warmth. And we were chatting, and this is after you had received this watch, and I'd seen this watch. And I had remarked to him, I said, it's pretty amazing that David's name is on the dial of the watch. He goes, "That is actually the only watch I've made to date," and this was a while ago, "that actually has the name of the collector who individually commissioned the watch." Yeah. So I thought that's very special about the watch, and certainly an incredible story to have associated with a special piece like that.
Thank you. For me, it's a beginning of my Josh Shapiro collecting. I have this other piece, which is a tantalum Infinity series. And
beautiful.
It is absolutely beautiful. I love the combination. They're great complements to each other. One is extremely classic, dressy. This has a little bit more of a sports feel to it. Mm-hmm. But I'm also really excited about his next project, which is to make his own movement, which I think is a beautiful way for him to continue his journey, mm-hmm. and prove just, what an amazing watchmaker he is.
It's incredible. He's doing it right here in the United States?
Yes.
In LA?
Yes.
So the next question, David, is, you clearly have quite a collection of modern and vintage. Would you say that you're more of a vintage or more of a modern enthusiast when you're collecting watches?
Oh, you're asking me to pick. To me, they're different. There is, when you think about vintage, they come with so much character. I think about this 1675 Pepsi, which I've always wanted to own a 1675. I've always looked for one that had particular character, and this one has this. How many colors exist on the bezel? Not just the red fading, but even the blue. It's so imperfect, and these imperfections are what make this watch so special. And someone may look at this watch and look at the blemishes on the markers. I love them. I love these blemishes because they're part of the story of this watch. Just like how imperfect once again the bracelet on it is, and you wear this, and I don't know, it just brings you back to the 1960s, 70s. This watch is from 1964, and I absolutely love it for those reasons. And then there's another vintage watch here that I love that actually connects me to my father. So my father also, I mentioned my mother earlier, but my father also loved watches. And I have many photos of him wearing an Audemars Piguet Royal Oak during the 1980s, 1990s, even into the 2000s. And I have many pictures of him, on the beach in the south of France wearing a 5402.
Incredible.
And so this is not his, but it's a way certainly to connect back to him.
Very tasteful gentleman.
Very tasteful gentleman.
Ahead of his time.
Ahead of his time in many ways. I remember him, talking about Audemars Piguets, and when to his friends. And so this is me overhearing these conversations, and at the time having no idea what's going on. We have something in common for better or for worse, is we both lost our father recently.
We did.
And the month before he passed away, I traveled to Paris to spend a few days with him. And he was very sick. He knew that his days were numbered, and so he took that opportunity to give me this Panerai, which he bought in the early 2000s. It's completely dinged up. There's probably some humidity that got in the case because the dial is specced. And again, like if I think about the last 20 years, there's so many times that I've seen this watch on his wrist. And when he gave it to me, he said, I want to make sure I give it to you because I want to see you take possession of it as opposed to you having to find it somewhere and inherit it that way. And so, this connects me back to him. So certainly vintage has sort of these stories, this character, and associated back to maybe, memories that we have of whether it's our own history or the history at large. But I can't tell you that, I just love vintage. Actually, if anything, I find my journey goes back and forth. Sometimes it's by the day, sometimes it's by the month, sometimes it's by the year. But for me, the ultimate modern in many ways is Richard Mille. I think, what he's doing and what the company is doing is just incredible. And it's almost the opposite of so many of those watches in terms of the ergonomics, in terms of the materials. It preserves really this technicality of fine watchmaking when it comes to the movement, but everything around the movement is innovative, and nothing feels more comfortable on the wrist. I have to say.
Yeah.
And it's not to single them out, but when I go for a bike ride or for a run, there's something that feels so extremely comfortable and cool. I forget that I'm wearing this, and it's not like it shaves off any time, and it's not like these seconds are precious to shave off, but it feels just amazing to wear.
It's an amazing watch, David. This is the RM.
This is the 6702.
The 6702. Yeah, really beautiful, very lightweight watch. Thanks for joining us for our first collector-to-collector conversation here at the Shreve Crumble YouTube channel. If you're enjoying our content, please don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. If you're a collector in the New England area and would like to be featured on our channel, please reach out to us at sales@shrevecrumpandload.com. Subject line, Collector Conversations. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy part 2.